welcome to the PUCL public meeting on judicial accountability.
Finally, I will introduce the speakers, and both Aspi and Chander are old friends of mine, very approachable, and despite their seniority, despite the standing that they have been very helpful to all of us. Whenever we need help, they have come out of the way to help us. As far as Aspi is concerned, Aspi Chinoy, he is the senior most advocate in Bombay High Court. A very respected person, liked by all. I mean, though he's been my opponent in some cases, he's been a very fair opponent, and I would say that he has taken up a number of PI cases, one of which was the beef ban matter, and also the issue of illegal constructions under the MRTP Act, which would challenge 32A. He has also defended Tista in the bail application. He has defended Singh and Anand Grover in the FCRA matter. He has also at the time of the riots, the issue of relief given, which was not being extended properly, he went to Ahmedabad and took up that case and fought for it on it.
So I looked at this topic, and initially I thought, well, it's really important because Tista is a friend, and what she has done only, I think we know how much she has contributed. But I think Tista and Himanshu are symptoms, and the issue is much larger than them. And I really am going to digress because I believe that in many ways we are living in the 25th hour, and that what you are seeing in Tista's case or Himanshu's case or anyone else's case is just a small tip of an iceberg which is going to erupt one of these days. So I am going to digress in two areas. I want to see where we have come that something like this can happen. How we reach there. What the court did to either enable it or to stop it. And what hope there is of judicial recourse in such situations. So I am going to digress out. But I am not going to, you see, if I was to tell you that of course it's atrocious what they've done to Tista. Of course that the judgment of Justice Khanvilkar is a stain, actually. It's a blemish on judicial conscience and constitution. But these are trite words. We all know that. What we have to understand is how we ended up here and where are we, which is far more important. Look, I believe I'll come to the end and then go somewhere. That there were conflicting ideas of India. There was the Gandhi, Nehru, Ambedkar idea of India. The one of religious equality, of tolerance. And there was the Savarkar, Gorwalkar idea of India, which has now been short formed into Hindutva. In independence, the Nehru-Ambedkar idea won through. And it remained that way for years. I'm only giving you the summary of the end, and I'll tell you why we reached where we are. But somewhere in the last 10 years, 8 years, we are now in the Savarkar version of India. Let's have no bones about it. The constitution remains, all those fancy words, the nice clauses, the institutions, the courts, the election commission, but they mean very little. You are now living in Savarkar's India. De facto, you have very limited recourse. Why I want to say this is very often we don't believe what's happening around us. And we delude ourselves into thinking it's not happening. So, when I look back, I think we're somewhere at the time of the Weimar Republic in 1933 in Germany. And you're very close to cataclysmic events. I want to therefore go back. I'm not being alarmist, but I'm being far more realist It says that we pretend that we are, the institutions of the state are there, the constitution is there, we are safe, till they come to get you. Then you are like Tista or Himanshu or anyone else. There is very little recourse. So I don't want to spend 15 minutes in saying how we got here and the role the court played, and then take it a bit on from there. Might be a little boring, but I'll try to make it brief. So let me go back to saying, we all know that India is a multicultural, very diverse society. In 1931, when the Congress had the Karachi session, Gandhi introduced the Fundamental Rights Bill by saying that the essence of India is religious neutrality and religious tolerance. And he passed it at that time. At the same time, then and many years thereafter, there was a conflicting idea of India. It was first enunciated in, I think, 20s by Savarkar, in Who is a Hindu, where he defined India as a culturally Hindu country, as an ethno-religious identity. It's important to have these concepts because otherwise we can't understand why we are where we are. That's really the Hindu Rashtra concept. Now, ethno-religious identity, cultural identity, necessarily excluded all other religions and cultures. But Savarkar's gripe was about Muslims and Christians, because he said they neither treat this as their holy land nor as their motherland. The others he was willing to tolerate. Govarkar went a little further. In 1938, he said Muslims must entertain no idea but those of glorification of the Hindu race and culture. They may stay in this country, but wholly subordinated to the Hindu nation, claiming nothing, not even citizens' rights. These are important words because today you are living in Savarkar's India. Don't make a mistake about it. Govarkar went a little further. In the 30s, he talked of the minorities problem, and he greatly appreciated Hitler's ability to cope with the minority problems. In the 1940s, when this went on, both Jinnah and Savarkar believed in a two-nation theory. The difference was that Jinnah wanted a territory of undivided India which would be for Muslims. Savarkar said no, Muslims can stay in the same land, but living in a subordinate position to Hindus. That is very clear to him. Now, in 1947, there were conflicting views. There was the Gandhi-Nehru-Ambedkar view of a plural multicultural India. And there was the Savarkar-Govarkar view which talked of it as a majoritarian state, a religious, cultural Hindu state. In 1947, the Ambedkarites, the Gandhiites had their way. Rajiv Gandhi, speaking on this, said it's very important to realize that it's not a two-nation theory. It was a Pakistan and a multicultural, plural India. Although it's often termed by the RSS and the VHP as the unfinished agenda, because their view has always been that if the Muslims got Pakistan, it's a short change to say that the Hindus can't get the Hindustan. Basically, that's been the way it has. Now, we can fast forward. As late as 1973, the Supreme Court of India in Keshavanandi said secularism was a part of our basic constitutional framework. In 1976, the word secularism was introduced for the first time in the constitution. When Ambedkar had been very careful to avoid the word secularism because secularization and secularism is a whole new debate which I don't want to waste time on now. But the 1980s, the problem started. The Communist Party, according to me, undermined secularism by playing up to voting blocs and stoking divisive pressures. In 1985, an inexperienced Rajiv Gandhi buckled under pressure from Muslim groups and bought the Shah Banu Amendment, which was really the beginning of the end as I saw it. Then concerned about losing Hindu support and being called pseudo-secular, he sought to mollify Hindu sentiments by giving concessions on the Ayodhya issue. Don't forget that Rajiv Gandhi opened the gates of the Ayodhya mosque. People forget that, wasn't it? In fact, the BJP was a non-entity at that time, and it did not have this on its agenda at all. The unlocking of the gates was manipulated through a judicial order with the aid of the Uttar Pradesh government under Congress control. Then there was, of course, the massive Ayodhya movement and the Babri Masjid demolition in 1992, where Prime Minister Narasimha Rao spent those 4 hours in inexplained solitude, doing nothing to stop it while everything was happening around him. The government then dismissed 4 BJP governments on the basis that they were too inclined towards the Ayodhya movement to do justice in the matter. In 1994, a 9-judge bench dealt with a challenge to this, the dissolution of 4 state assemblies, and said that secularism has a positive as well as a negative content. One of which was that the state and the executive cannot espouse a religion. And they said that was an affirmative duty. They even went further, that if a state government was to espouse religion and act contrary to the mandate of secularism, it should be removed as a failure of constitutional machinery. The only problem is, while talking about the states, they forgot that this could be at the center. And who dismisses the central government? No one. But it's a conundrum which no one had even thought of at that time. Now, immediately after the Bomai judgment of 94, there were state elections, especially in Maharashtra. A lot of campaigning went on Hindutva. If you remember Manmohan Joshi's Hindustan state and all Prabhu's case and all that. The Bombay High Court struck down 12 elections on the grounds that they were clearly pandering to religion and religious identities. The matter went to the Supreme Court in 96. And it's interesting, but Justice Verma, and this is where the complicity of the Supreme Court comes in, which we must know, although people rarely talk of it. In 96, Justice Verma was part of the Bomai bench, now entertaining the matter in which vituperative comments had been made on Hindutva's basis. He then referred to diverse texts on Hinduism and then made the interesting slate of hand movement which equated Hindutva with Hinduism. They said Hinduism is a way of life. So is Hindutva a way of life. So it's not a matter of religion. So there can't be bigotry. In effect, by that one movement, he undermined the entire secular basis of India because he licensed a rampant appeal to political Hinduism on the grounds that it was a way of life and religion. Immediately following that matter, the same batch was Manmohan Joshi's matter. In Manmohan Joshi's matter, he had gone so far as to say that Maharashtra should be the first Hindu state. Now, how to deal with that? So Verma then came up with this idea that this is an aspirational statement. It's not an appeal to religion. He then said, in Prabhu's case, I've already decided that an appeal to Hindutva is not an appeal to religion. And so he let off Manmohan Joshi also in the matter. These 2 decisions stand, if they can, be in a hall of judicial infamy because they opened the door to where we are today. They legitimized it. In a short while, from 2 seats in 1984, the BJP won 161 seats in the Lok Sabha and became the single largest party there. During all these years that came up after that, there has been a change in the narrative. Secularism is appeasement. secularism is secularism. Benefits to majority community is a matter of faith. And there the equivalence came. And after the BJP won the 2014 and 2019 elections, the process of subversion of our constitutional secularism and the imposition of a majoritarian ethnocracy gained peace. We have to realize where we came from. What has happened then? The virtual exclusion of the Muslim from the political sphere. The last three members of parliament, three Muslim members of parliament, the BJP, resigned a few days ago. Now there isn't a single Muslim member of parliament in the BJP. There has not been a Muslim MLA in any of the assemblies. So the Muslim has ceased to become relevant politically. And the strategy of the BJP has been to say that if we polarize and consolidate Hindu votes, we don't need Muslim votes. And the exclusion of Muslim votes is a matter of irrelevancy thereafter. And then, with the political exclusion of the Muslim, comes brazen majoritarian politics, privileging of a majority community, the ethnicization of the state when the whole cabinet goes to Ayodhya, where everyone prays. I'm not saying culturally prayer is bad, but this is an ethnicization of the state itself. And a shift to a majoritarian politics which has succeeded in bringing the narrative that any form of secularism is actually appeasement politics, and therefore results in more polarization. The most important thing is the targeting of fraternization. The BJP's policy and Savarkar's policy was a complete non-fraternization between Muslims and Hindus. So therefore you have love jihad, you have all these riots where someone tries marrying interfaith, allegations of converting young Hindu women, which are so rare, but becomes a whole major narrative, a narrative of fear and paranoia. And then there are laws. Do you know that in Gujarat, they have a stratagem of declaring a town a disturbed area. Once it's a disturbed area, a government can prevent a Muslim from buying a house in a Hindu area, or from a Hindu selling a block to a Muslim. And when the Chief Minister was asked in 2019, he said we have set this rule in areas where there have been riots to tell the Muslims that they might buy property only in their own areas. And then of course, you pass laws which criminalize cow slaughter and beef. That's another saga. For 5 constitution benches in 50 years, the Supreme Court had allowed bullock slaughter beyond the certain age. An 8-judge bench under Justice Lawati reversed all those judgments by saying that those judgments had not realized that after a bullock becomes inappropriate for agriculture, it still gives dung. And Justice Mathur, in a dissent, has said, it is a little strange to say that 5 constitutional benches over 50 years did not know that bullocks give dung. That's the way life is. Then, banning non-vegetarian food in holy cities. For example, now, the state of UP had banned orders in Haridwar, Rishikesh, Barasana, Ayodhya, Chitrakoot, Devban. In 21, they notified 22 out of 70 wards in Mathura and Vrindavan as holy pilgrimage sites, banning the sale of non-vegetarian food. And then, more ominous for all of us, there is this osmosis between state action and vigilante action, which should also remind you of the 32s and the 33s, where the SA actually became a part of government later. So the vigilante groups, they have a movement called a Gaon Rakshak Dal. They liaise with the police. They intercept whenever they think there is cow movement. They brutally assault anyone. If he is a Hindu, then he gets off lighter. If If he's a Muslim, he dies. Then of course, the vigilantes also attack anyone who marries a Hindu woman or or interfaith marriage. They're always there. In fact, it's become such a problem that people have wondered whether under the Special Marriage Act you should give notice. Because the moment you give notice that is given to the vigilante groups, who they pile in on you. I'm saying this only as exemplification of where we have come from where we were. And then there is a troll army which lampoons, harasses, victimizes everyone from Arun Shuri for his son who was not born properly there to all. And this propaganda blitz is carried on with no response. And you must understand, judges don't live in an ivory tower. And judgments, especially of constitutional courts, are always affected by the social, political environment in which they exist. I'll give you a simple answer. Take a map like Ayodhya. When the masjid was demolished in 1992, everyone, including the new people, expressed remorse, regret. No one would have suggested. Then came the movements, the Ayodhya movement, the BJP coming to power. When the matter was heard 10 years later, it was unthinkable to restore the mosque. The matter had been lost before it was argued. The court may put it in all the good language at once, but I have no doubt that a large part of the judgment was necessarily influenced by the context of the political mobilization of the time, which made it impossible to do anything else. So you have Justice Chander probably mentioning it as an egregious wrong in the Indian Constitution and then awarding the land over. But that's because the Ayodhya matter was lost before it was on. It was lost in the politics of India. Then there has been this relentless attack on secularism. In fact, it's interesting to note that when Modi had his 2009 victory, in his speech, he mocked his opponents by saying that no political party had mustered the courage to mention the word secularism. And he was right. In fact, Hamid Ansari, his vice president, stated later that the term secularism has almost gone from the political vocabulary, replaced by secularism, as they call it, and by pseudo-secularism or appeasement. In fact, to see how far it's gone, a couple of years back, the governor of district, Judiciary, the chap who's there still, wrote a letter to Thackeray in which he said, "Have you suddenly turned secular yourself?" in a very pejorative tone. This is the governor in his official capacity writing down. The Prime Minister, the Home Minister from time to time make platitudinous statements. Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. But this was just that. They ensure that what they can't do, everyone under them does. And with the cover of the state. So make no mistake, this isn't the fringe. The fringe is the government. That's the way it is today. In fact, today, so effective have they been that even opposition parties are playing a soft Hindutva line. They can't muster up the courage to stand for constitutional principles. Now, it is in these circumstances that we are here today. These constitutional rights, 14, 19, 29, 30, all remain. The court remains. But it really means very little today. Let me assure you, you are making a great mistake if you think you are living in Gandhi's India. You will have the unfortunate consequence of being where Pista is. Pista is not an aberration. She's just a more visible aberration. Today the norm is that you are living in a completely different India, where you do not have the rights you think you have. And and you do not have the recourse which you think you have, and which is important to understand and acknowledge. Therefore, I have come to the conclusion, and which I feel is the end of the first part. I hope I stayed too long. Is that we are now living in Savarkar's India, and you have to accept that. If you make the mistake of thinking you're living in the India where you were brought up in, born in, you are making a terrible mistake which will have great consequences for you. In Savarkar's India, the government shows no inhibitions in using state machinery, CBI, ED, whatever it is, or the Delhi police, which is like a washing machine, to target whatever it sees as its opponents and critics, or those who try to defend the old order and the old principles, and to ensure that politicians, who always have some skeletons in their cupboard, are made to vote for the right party and change their affiliation. You use UAPA against students. You bulldoze the homes of persons whom you think took part in riots. And then you, of course, lie through your teeth to the Supreme Court to say, no, this is only town planning, and I planned it long back. Coupled with the complete decimation of institutions like the Election Commission, or the CDC, or almost all your institutions. Now, that brings me to probably the end, that part. Where do the courts go with this? The courts enable this by the 96 judgment. Make no bones about it. And they've never gone back to correct that error. Even now, once in a while they show courage. But by and large, they remain mute spectators, or they use big words which mean little. Let me tell you, for example, when the freezing of the internet took place in Kashmir, our present Chief Justice sat on a bench which heard the matter for months on end. Then he passed an enormous judgment in which he said that internet is part of Article 19(1). And then what did he do? He said, but I must leave it to the government to decide when they will bring back internet. Now, if you were going to leave it to the government, why spend all this time? Or take the Pegasus story, which is an even more funny one. The petition is that the government is misusing Pegasus illegally in India. The government refuses to file an affidavit. The additional Solicitor General says, I won't file an affidavit. The normal consequence should have been the court says, if you don't file, you don't deny, it's true, you're misusing it. Then they should have given. Instead of which they set up a technical committee. Now, what is a technical committee going to do in this matter? And that's where we are today. Or take Mohammed Zubair's case, for that matter. A 2018 tweet of his regarding a movie which had been passed in 1983 by the Central Board is raked up by a Twitter account which mysteriously disappears after raking up the issue. No one knows where it went. The police immediately lodge an FIR on that. When he gets bail or attempts to get bail in one, 6 others are created. Now, Zubair was probably lucky that in the end of the day, he got bail. But Zubair is the exception. Let's go back to Nupur Sharma's case. The court initially declined to hear a petition. Said it was a disgrace that she had set India on fire and that she should apologize to the country. They also noted an interesting factor. The Delhi police file an FIR to protect all these government people. What they do is, they file an FIR so that other governments can't arrest. But they take no steps in the matter. So, in fact, the court pointed out that Sharma was not even questioned. She gave a statement once, no arrest. Supreme Court said this. There was a hue and cry. There was a troll army. Many of them even said that Justice Pardiwala, because he was a Parsi, all Parsis should go back to Iran. I read it myself. I'm not joking. You have to realize that bigotry, and these are intelligent people. Bigotry has no bounds in India today. And then the VHP said, how could you do this? You're forgetting 1400 years of aggression. What happened? A few weeks later, Nupur Sharma refiles a petition. And this time they give her relief. And they stop all people from arresting Singh anywhere. Delhi police will of course not arrest her. So she remains free. It is in this context that the Supreme Court's judgment in Zakia falls for consideration. Why did I say this? Because this is not a one-person situation. There is an infrastructure today, a political infrastructure today, which will attack, hound and victimize anyone who fights back. And you must realize that this is not the Marquis of Queensberry's rules being played here. They will find your vulnerabilities and they will attack you and they will hound you. Now, what is the recourse? In Tista's case, a 452-page judgment is delivered. Then in paragraph 307, they make those rather strange comments, about coalesced effort of disgruntled officials along with others to create a sensation by making revelations which were false. That there is an audacity to question the integrity of functionaries involved, to keep the pot boiling for ulterior designs, and that they need to be in the dark. In Savarkar's India, these words were more than enough. In Gandhi's India, nothing would have happened. But in Savarkar's India, these words immediately left to an FIR and an arrest. And let me put it this way. Whatever be the merits of the main, I don't mind at all. Whatever be the merits of the main judgment, these words in paragraph 307 are procedurally unfair and amount to judicially licensing revenge. They are very serious words. When the Supreme Court says you should be proceeded against, how many people down the line are going to take a different view, especially in Savarkar's India? Setalwar had never been issued a notice that any action was proposed to be taken against her, or that any findings were to be recorded against her. She had by tireless efforts ensured, through the Supreme Court often, the reinvestigation of many Gujarat cases, the conviction of so many people. This must probably be, I say with respect, the lowest ebb of judicial conscience in India to make these sort of comments about her. Really a low ebb. This part of the judgment should, and I hope will be treated as a blemish on the constitutional conscience of the Supreme Court. It should and will be treated as a blemish on the record of the Supreme Court. It will be remembered, I hope, in the lines of the ADM Jabalpur case, which talked of the diamond bright, diamond hard hope of the court in the times of the emergency, and which took about 20-30 years to realize there was a disgrace and a blot on India's judicial record. Hopefully this part of the judgment will meet the fate in time to come of ADM Jabalpur, and that the court will itself rectify this, what I think, a grave error. But I want to stress, for every Zubair or for even a Tista, there are many others. Just think about it. There is Mr. Siddiqui Kapan. He went to Hathras. He was a Kerala journalist. He was arrested in October 20. He's gone to the Supreme Court twice. He's still under arrest. The Bhima Koregar accused, they did an arrest from June 2018. And when the MBA government tried reinvesting the cases, they promptly transferred them to the NIA. And the NIA then puts all these absurd charges, including assault on Modi and assassination, and you don't get bail. Or Shahjil Imam, arrested in March 20 in the CA riots, still there. So, I went beyond my topic because I don't think Tista is the topic. Tista is a symptom of the times you're in. These are very, very dangerous times. What we knew of India and what we grew up in doesn't exist. And if you don't recognize that to be to your benefit, maybe there is a future. Who knows? Majoritarian movements often end up in grief decades down the line. Maybe there are wars, maybe there are riots, maybe countries fall apart, one doesn't know. But as of today, these constitutional rights remain by and large effervescent. If you are lucky to go to the right bench of the Supreme Court, you might get luck and might get it. But there's every chance you won't. And there's every chance you'll remain incarcerated. So you have to realize today that defenders of civil liberties or citizens or whatever it is, you speak out, you object, you stand in great risk. Do it by all means, but don't be under any illusions that consequences won't follow. I hate to say this, but I think you need to know a lot of the people in 1933 and 34 thought this could never happen, that this could never happen to them. They were so well settled, they were so intellectually advanced, they were all involved in business. But these things do happen. Nations do tend to lose balance. And when majoritarian movements and ethnicity of this nature is advanced, one never knows where it goes. That's all. Thank you.
Uday Singh, who is our next speaker. He is a senior advocate presently practicing in the Supreme Court. Earlier, he was a journalist working with India Today and covered many important stories, including the Assam strike, the corruption in EGS, and a number of other stories. He then came to practice in the Bombay High Court. He was also, before he started in Bombay High Court, he was practicing in the industrial courts and represented Ajay Mehta's union, and then came up to the High Court where he took up many important cases. Now he is in the Supreme Court, and some of the important cases that he dealt with, one important one which I would just like to point out is the Krishna Kumar case, which basically held that repeated promulgation of ordinances as unconstitutional. That is what the Supreme Court held. And ultimately also a number of cases, for example in the demolition case also he's been appearing before this.
I think Aspi has given an absolutely brilliant framework in which we live and explaining the genesis of why the Supreme Court is probably doing what it's doing. And I'm really grateful to him for doing that because it really puts everything in a perspective which we need to keep at the back of our mind. What I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on precisely what the Supreme Court has done in these two cases, and also it has overtones in lots of other cases and so on. But let me just give a sort of flashback. We have a Supreme Court of India which during the 1970s, the 1980s, the 1990s got itself it was lauded all over the world, and it made for itself a reputation after ADM Double which was 1975. But after that, when it came back from the wild, sort of the wilderness, and started finding its sanity again post-emergency, when the pressure of a dictatorial government was lifted off its the jackboot sort of was lifted off the necks of the judges, the Supreme Court actually went ahead and created a reputation for itself as the strongest court in the world, and a court which spoke for the lowest and the most marginalized citizen in the nation. Just to give you a brief sort of summary, in state of Rajasthan versus Union of India, which was one of those judgments which led to Omai. In 1977, this is soon after the emergency over. In 1977, Justice Goswami said that from being the court of the rich and powerful, the Supreme Court was becoming, quote, the last resort for the oppressed and the bewildered. That was a judge of the Supreme Court in that seven-judge judgment. In 1982, Professor Upendra Bakshi, who made one of the greatest commentators on the courts of India and the Supreme Court, in his essay on taking suffering seriously, social action litigation in the Supreme Court of India, he said, quote, the Supreme Court of India is at long last becoming, after 32 years of the Republic, the Supreme Court for Indians. In 1996, Chief Justice Ahmadi, who was then the sitting Chief Justice from 94 to 97, I think he was Chief Justice of India, in a speech which is really makes great detail called Judicial Process, Legitimacy and Institutional Viability, Ahmadi said, when derelictions of constitutional obligations and gross violations of human rights are brought to the notice of the Supreme Court, it cannot be expected to split hairs in an effort to maintain the delicate balance of power between the wings of government. It must act in a positive manner that will provide relief which is real and not illusory to the parties who exercise their fundamental right in invoking its jurisdiction. So, Article 32, which is the article under which people can approach the Supreme Court directly in a writ jurisdiction, is itself in the fundamental rights chapter of the Constitution of India. It is probably the only instance anywhere in the world of having a fundamental right. Every citizen has a fundamental right to approach the Supreme Court of India. And it is that fundamental right which Ahmadi said must be made available to every single citizen, and the Supreme Court must act firmly for saving, examining instances of executive overreach and so on. It is that fundamental right under Article 32 which is suddenly being turned on its head and being used now to attack the invoker, the person who invokes it. So 45 years after Justice Goswami's ringing endorsement of the last refuge for the oppressed and the bewildered, we suddenly have a situation where the Supreme Court seems to have decided that it is the mighty government which is under threat from people who invoke the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. And suddenly the government needs protection. The government needs to be protected from people who raise questions. So if you raise questions now, the Supreme Court says, how dare you have the audacity to raise questions, to question the highest in the land. So if you question the executive and you invoke the fundamental right to move the Supreme Court, you are under a threat. You are under a constant threat today that you might be suddenly told by the Supreme Court that here is a person who should be booked and proceeded against criminally for invoking the jurisdiction of the court. So, where did this come from? It comes from saying that Zakia Jafri was misled in questioning the fact that there was a massacre, that her husband, who had spoken on telephone to the Home Minister, to the Chief Minister, to the Commissioner of Police, had come there, visited him and assured him that nothing would happen. He was then, when there was a threat to burn down the entire Gulbarga society with everybody in it, he went out to try and negotiate and placate the mob and tell the mob that look, don't do this, take my life if you want, but don't burn this Gulbarga society with all the residents in it. Gulbarga, by the way, had already been burnt once, and Ehsan Jafri and Member of Parliament had rebuilt it on the same side, refusing to move out, saying no, this was the home which was burnt and we will rebuild it on the same side and we will live here because this is our nation, this is our land. He was hacked to pieces and after that they still burned it down and they killed, I don't know, multiple numbers, tens of 68 people were killed, burned alive in that thing. What was Zakia Jafri asking for? She was asking the Supreme Court to investigate whether this was part of a larger conspiracy. And the larger conspiracy, it was made very clear in the argument by Kapil Sibal that it is not, we are not arguing anything about the meeting in the Chief Minister's chamber, which was earlier because that the Supreme Court has already ruled that that is not a relevant factor. isolated petition, I can understand. I mean, I can't understand. But had it been an isolated petition, perhaps there would be some bizarre remote excuse to justify what the Supreme Court said with regard to the person who brought the petition. I'm not even going into the fact that they refused to entertain the petition because the Supreme Court can do that. But to say this in a case where the Supreme Court itself had found evidence of conspiracy and found that justice cannot be got in the state of Gujarat and had moved the West Bengal case out of the state of Gujarat to Maharashtra. The state Supreme Court had found that justice could not be done and moved the case of Bilkis Bano out of Gujarat to the state of Maharashtra. These cases were ultimately heard, the trials were conducted, and convictions resulted in the state of Maharashtra. Now, Bilkis Bano's case was one where I think 8 members of her family, 3 days after the Godhra riots, their homes had been burned. They were on the streets. They were 200 kilometers away from the place where they actually belonged, because they were just trying to look for running for safety, looking for refuge. They were massacred. And these are findings of the Supreme Court. Okay, so I'm not saying anything off the cuff. They were all massacred, including a 3.5-year-old child. She was pregnant. She was gang raped multiple times by people, and everybody is active in her presence. They then had dug holes and they went and brought sacks of salt and they put all the bodies in and they put in the sacks of salt to decompose the body. Doctors and the police gave false certificates. All this has been proved. Justice, the trial took place in the Sessions Court in Bombay. The police were convicted. Justice Tehramani's bench in the Bombay High Court confirmed the convictions and in fact added convictions of the doctors as who had given false certificates as well as some police officers. The Supreme Court in 2018 dismissed the petitions of the appeals of the police, etc., who were convicted. 2018, for what had happened in 2002. And the Supreme Court here in Bhatia said, 16 years later, you are still trying to keep the bottom of the boil. So, the courts have found conspiracy. Now, what happens after that in Bilkis Bano is very interesting. The SLP of the police is dismissed, so all the convictions are confirmed. Now, Bilkis, she had a writ petition pending, so she said, her lawyer said, and she was supported again by, it was not Tista directly, but there were other human rights defenders. She said that I must be compensated. Look at what has happened to me. I've been orphaned, I've lost my entire family. My 3.5-year-old daughter was not only hacked to pieces, but her body was never found. So she couldn't even get wireless and put to rest the body of her daughter who was hacked in her presence. And she was now 40 years old. So she said, I must be compensated. The compensation given to me by the Sessions Court of some 2,000 rupees or something is illusory. The Supreme Court in 2020 awarded her, the judgment is actually on 23rd April 2019, awarded her 50 lakh rupees. The Gujarat government was directed to pay her 50 lakh rupees to provide her a house and to provide her employment, but of course the Supreme Court added if she is willing to accept the employment that they give her, and the house that they were to provide if she is willing to accept the house that they provide, because the Supreme Court obviously knew that they provide some house to her or something. But, so this same Supreme Court finds that a 50 lakh compensation has to be given to a victim of these same riots, and 68 people who have been killed over there should not be investigated as part of that larger conspiracy which had taken so many lives. About 1,000 or 2,000 lives were taken during that 7 days of inaction. Now, what was Zakia Jafri, the widow, who had seen her husband being massacred and 68 people being killed in her presence, what was she asking for? She was just asking for an investigation. Okay, you don't want to do it, reject your petition. You want to make a mockery of yourself? Do it. You have a right, as the Supreme Court of India, to say that whatever we did in 1977, whatever we did in the 1980s, the great revelation we made as the most powerful court in the world, we renounce it. We are now the High Court, that was rejected. So she came as petition number 2 to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court rejected her intervention. The Supreme Court in its judgment starts by saying they are not hearing petition number 2, and we are not going into that aspect because they only decide Zakia's case. So, having done that, having shut her out of the entire thing, they then at the end condemn her and make observations against her, a person who they themselves say they are not going to hear you. So she was only there in name, and they make these observations against her, which now in the bail order the judge has entirely gone on that, saying this is what the Supreme Court said, therefore I can't grant bail. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, what happened with Himanshu Kumar is really, really shocking. In 2009, 19 tribals were killed in a village. Now, there was at that time the famous Operation Green Hunt. This was not a BJP government, this was a Congress government. But they had launched this Operation Green Hunt in the entire tribal areas, and it was war against their own citizens. And they had created a militia which was armed by the government called Salvador. So there were atrocities galore. Villages were being burned, and at least it's documented that 68 or 70 or 80 villages were burned. They had followed 645. I'm sorry, I have the figure completely wrong, and I apologize for that. 644 villages were burned. When we talk about the Rohingyas in Myanmar or something, we were doing exactly the same to our citizens in the Red Corridor, what they call the Red Corridor. So, in that period, Himanshu Kumar moves this petition saying that 19 people have been killed. Among those petitioners, along with Himanshu Kumar, even one survivor from that massacre was a petitioner, and the relatives of each one of those 19 was a petitioner. Himanshu Kumar was only petitioner number 1. There were 19 other petitioners, relatives of each one of people killed. At some stage where a sessions judge from Delhi was asked to investigate by the Supreme Court, recorded statements, and many of them said we couldn't recognize who killed us. Himanshu Kumar was saying that the killings are the petition proceeded on the basis that the killing was state-sponsored. Now the fact is that police come in various guards, and at that time the Salvador, which was a militia, which wasn't the police because they had police verdicts, but they were ill-trained. The Supreme Court ultimately struck down Salvador in 2011, saying that it's an absolute travesty, it's completely unconstitutional. You're giving 48 hours training to villagers and arming them and telling them to kill their fellow villagers. So this same thing now, a 2009 petition comes up in 2022 for hearing, and they say, look, you people are liars. When the Sessions Court asked you in 2010 or 2011 or something, you said you couldn't recognize the people who killed. Obviously, you can't recognize the people who killed. They come at night, they shoot and it was admitted that there had been massive police firing in that village because the hundreds and hundreds of bullets and all had been fired. There was no dispute about it. The question was, did those bullets kill those 19 or not, which requires investigation. So the Supreme Court says, but all of you people are liars, you don't even know anything, you come to the court, you waste our time. So we are dismissing this petition. Right? Again, that's your right. If you don't want to entertain a petition, you dismiss. Then they say, Himanshu Kumar has come here and wasted our time for 5 lakh rupees costs. And if he doesn't pay the cost, then it will be recovered by the state government in whatever means they want. They are not satisfied with that. They say that the state of Chhattisgarh should now investigate whether there was some deeper conspiracy, whether they should proceed against him not for perjury, but they should proceed against him for filing false evidence in the Supreme Court of India. Now, when the Supreme Court of India says proceed for filing false evidence before me, which court is going to say it wasn't false evidence? So they have straight away convicted him. But even that isn't all. What's really amazing is they actually give a direction in terms of para 67B of the application made in 2022 after the made by the Union of India. 2009 petition, new application in 2022, which Gayatri said was the application. Now that application said Prayer A was Holden guilty of filing false charges against the government. Holden petitioner guilty of filing false charges and therefore proceed for perjury. Now perjury is okay because perjury you direct under section 340 a complaint to be filed and the complaint to be tried and the person will have a full-on defense because the court will refer the perjury. Their order is completely irrelevant in a perjury proceeding. Because in a perjury proceeding it has to be tried afresh. The court is prima facie convinced that you lied, but it is for the trial court to decide. So the Supreme Court says, no, we are not going into prayer A. We are giving a direction in terms of prayer B. And what does prayer B say? Pass an order directing CBI, NIA, or any other central investigating agency or any other monitoring committee as this Honorable Court deems fit and proper to register an FIR and conduct an in-depth investigation to identify the individuals organizations who have been conspiring, abetting, and facilitating the filing of petitions premised on false and fabricated evidence before this Honorable Court, as well as before the Honorable High Courts, with a motive to either deter the security agencies to act against the left-wing Naxal militia by imputing false charges on them, or to screen off the left-wing Naxal militia from being brought to justice by creating a false narrative of victimization before the Honorable Courts. This has nothing to do with Himanshu Kumar. Investigate a larger conspiracy of anybody who ever alleges that the government or ever questions any action of the government in the Red Corridor. And now Naxal is not Red Corridor because even professors of management schools, even practicing lawyers are all considered urban Naxal. All of us sitting in this room are probably within that class of urban Naxal. So, I mean, here the Supreme Court is dealing with a government which has made it very clear that the word conspiracy can be stretched. It is so elastic that it can become everything and anybody all over the country in any crime. So, like Bhima Koregaon, the Elgar Parishad was is supposed to be the root, not the attack on peaceful people who were going to celebrate a 200-year-old Mahar victory. That attack and the huge injuries caused, the riots which were caused by Milind Ekote and Eknath so and so and all, that is all forgotten. So they say the Elgar Parishad was the root. So people who were not in the Elgar Parishad, who had never been there, who had never been to Pune, were roped in and are sitting in jail. The 16 and one of them has died. So, I mean, conspiracy can be stretched to any extent. The Delhi riots of February 2020, all the people who were victims are said to conspire to create riots so that they can be killed and their houses can be burned down. That is the conspiracy. 13,000 page charge sheet. So, and this is a direction. This is not a liberty. This is a direction of the Supreme Court. Pass an order directly. This is. I mean, it's shocking. It's absolutely a travesty because you are actually arming a government which needs no encouragement, which needs no, just no. It doesn't need any liberty from anybody because if you have a right, if they have a right to investigate a crime, they will do it, and they can do it, and they must do it. But if the Supreme Court gives a direction like this, the person who is investigated has no recourse there. No court will give you bail, no court is going to acquit you, because they will say the Supreme Court has spoken. They have already said that you are doing this by creating a false narrative of victimization before the Honorable Courts. That's the direction of the Supreme Court of India. So now, this is what these judgments have done, and they're going to be used, they're going to be used, misused, they're going to be the sort of the new weaponization that the government wants is given to them in these judgments. But let us see if there is this completely vengeful attitude towards human rights defenders, towards people who are social activists, towards people, because it is seen in the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, the way that is being treated. NGOs are being treated like enemies. The whole sort of atmosphere of the country is that anybody who questions, anybody who helps the downtrodden, anybody who works with tribals, anybody who works If Sumaira takes up sand mining tomorrow, they'll say this is anti-national because we need sand to make cement. So illegal sand mining will tomorrow she will be an urban naxal who is preventing people from illegally mining sand from all the rivers and destroying the rivers of India because you are anti-national. You're not allowing progress in this country to to make cement or sand or whatever. So let's for a moment just do a reality check. Is it that we are in this utopian nation where NGOs and activists and human rights defenders are not needed because everything is absolutely hunky-dory? Just on Tuesday, 4 or 5 days ago, on the 26th of July, Parliament was informed by the government that there were 4,844 custodial deaths since 2020. In 2020-21, there were 1,940 custodial deaths. In 21-22, there were 2,544 custodial deaths. This is informed by the government to Parliament. An average in the last 2 years of 6 custodial deaths per day. 6 custodial deaths per day. And somebody questions it, what were they accused of? Will they be come within this narrative of para 67B of the Supreme Court judgment in Manjukma? Will they be told that pay 10 lakh rupees costs because you have said that there are custodial deaths happening? In the state of Uday, which is supposed to have this very disciplined, this great anti-crime movement, etc., 501 out of those 4,844, 501 in one state alone, custodial deaths in 2 years. Custodial deaths, every single custodial death is supposed to be investigated as per D.K. Basu. There's supposed to be a full-on separate investigation. 4,800, have you heard of it? Have you read it in any newspaper? Did any television channel come up with it? This is in Parliament. So, if we have this sort of situation, if you have the Bilkis Bano case where in 2019 the Supreme Court is compelled or Supreme Court finds that they say to give 50 lakh rupees cost, 50 lakh rupees in reparations to somebody. You have cases where people are incarcerated and they are coming out after 10 years, 15 years with no evidence at all. Who's fighting for them? Who would fight for these poor people except the human rights defenders? We have got cases galore. The rate of conviction under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act is 0.57%. And they are filing 5,000 cases a year, 10,000 cases a year, and they've got 0.57% conviction. Who's going to defend those people? They all behind bars because they can't get bail. The bail conditions are so stringent that they cannot get bail. So it's only the human rights defender. And when they come out to defend now tomorrow, they'll be accused of falling foul of para 67B of Human Sukma. Well, that's Gayatri is right, and as she said, there's Pastor Nemola. Pastor Nemola, who's the famous thing that, first they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew, then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist, and then they came for the professors, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a professor, and finally they came for me, and there was nobody left to speak for me. So, this is what we are creating, this absolutely, Kafka-esque kind of nation where right is wrong and wrong is right, and you can, whatever you say. So now, with these sort of judgments, the government is armed to proceed. It's it's a little like having an autoimmune disease. And when you have an autoimmune disorder, your body starts attacking the cell to defend you. The body starts attacking its own cells, which are the first line of defense. Now, we as a nation are in a state of autoimmune disorder. We are attacking who? We are attacking NGOs and human rights defenders. For God's sake, you take them out of the equation, and no Supreme Court judge is going to be safe.
colleague, and this is what